Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and CA put out a bunch of news. I'm currently watching the live stream, but we'll take a break from this to kind of go over it and give you a recap. So go ahead and head on over to the Twitch stream. Actually, they'll have a recap where you can watch them doing this live stream, but for the time being, let's go ahead and look at the recap. So the main news is that Total War Rome 2 Empire Divided is going to be coming out. It is confirmed that this is going to be Crisis of the 3rd Century, as some were speculating. So this is going to come out at the end of the month on the 30th of November, and alongside this DLC is going to be a free LC, a free update called the Power and Politics Update. The FAQ and patch notes are going to be listed here. We're going to go over just the Power and Politics Update for the time being, and then I'll reserve a separate video for the Empire Divided. So as for Power and Politics, as I said, it's a free update, and it is actually available in beta right now if you want to go ahead and test it. Otherwise, they'll be updating it and get a full release, I believe, on the 30th. So they do say, hey, be warned, it will be interrupting with some of your different mods. So they say, you know, advance with caution and that caveat, but go ahead and try it out and give them some feedback. So Empire Divided, like I said, we'll be covering this in the future, but for now let's talk about the Power and Politics Update. So they say it's a large piece of free LC that will go ahead and impact kind of the political system for Rome 2 and then all of its DLC, with the exception of Caesar and Gaul, because Caesar and Gaul has its own kind of pre-prescribed faction politics. But other than that, I mean, Hannibal at the Gates, Wrath of Sparta, this politics update should apply to all, but then they've also introduced some new UI updates, bug fixes, etc., and those should be pretty universal. So the Power and Politics Update, what does it do? Like they said, it focuses on, obviously, your power and politics meter, trying to make it more interesting. So let's go into kind of the details here. So the first thing is political parties, influence, and loyalties. We've seen these in various degrees in other Total War titles. Attila, they brought them into full swing, especially the loyalty mechanic, but it's all coming into effect in Rome 2 here. Now, one caveat to this is CA did say that, hey, while they are doing all of this revamping, the family tree is not coming back. I think that was too much of an overhaul for them to handle. So unfortunately, we're not going to be seeing that. So most of the effort here is going to be pinned on the political parties. So if you're going to get involved in anything as opposed to getting involved in a specific family with their descendants, you're mostly going to be involved with the political party, which is actually tied to kind of like ruling families and clans. So that's maybe a little bit of a way to recoup for the loss of no family tree. But anyways, how does this work? So loyalty can be increased or decreased. Low loyalty for any party will result in chance of secession or civil war, and then new parties may spawn within your political system based on the imperium level. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the screen grabs that I had real quick. We'll be flipping between the description and kind of what's happening. So if we go to the summary sheet here, they've revamped things a little bit, so you can see, if you go to the politics tab, you can see some of the main different parties that are going to be up against you. So on the left, the familiarity of this kind of faction meter returns, but each of the different factions here has kind of a fleshed out trait to it. So that's pretty cool. So House of Cornelia, House of Junia, House of Papiria, you can click on different ones and you can take actions to secure loyalty or provoke them, which is all pretty cool. So a lot more dynamism to each of these. And then another thing that they've introduced as well is, okay, you know, we've seen this before where you have different influences, but this is an arbitrary kind of screen here. They've gone ahead and reflected this in the real world in terms of faction maps. So control of kind of your influence in this meter directly translates to control of territory. And we'll go over this real briefly, but I just wanted to give that little bit of an introduction of how they're kind of changing things. So yeah, different factions get introduced. You can see different traits. You can even see successors and things of that nature. So let's go back here and look at things. So political parties, areas of influence. So each political party in your empire will control a number of provinces depending on their influence. The more influence a party has, the more provinces it will control. The exact provinces under the control of each party are automatically assigned by an algorithm that tries to keep all territories close together. In a case of civil war, the new faction that spawns will have those provinces that were previously allocated to that seceding party. So that's pretty cool. So kind of to describe that in real time, let's say, for instance, this is my early Roman Republic. House of Julia and House of Junia are about even in terms of their political influence. Let's just assume that. What the algorithm is going to do is, let's say I go ahead and with my legions, I go and attack Cisalpine or Cisalpine Gaul. Taking this region, the algorithm is going to look to see, hey, who is the most powerful? So that's one of the factions. So let's say both of these are hovering around, 40% each. What the algorithm is going to do is it's going to look for a proximity. And so this territory here will go to the allegiance of House of Julia because it's next to it. Whereas down south, if you were to take Carthage or perhaps go into Greece, it would give it to the House of Junia. And so that's kind of how the algorithm works. New territorial acquisitions go to kind of who has the most power, but then also it has a little bit of a calculation into it for proximity of the regions. And the reason they wanted to do that is so that in the event of a secession where, this whole area in red will go ahead and become a new faction, it's going to do so with kind of a contiguous landmass and not so much a patchwork of regions. So I think that was a cool little compromise to go for, which makes it very interesting. And this is also a dynamic map that will change over time. So let's say you take a lot of political actions to reduce the influence of the House of Julia. What you'll do is you'll see their territorial influence kind of reduce as well. So it's kind of cool. And so yeah, this is a new political party affiliation tab that you can toggle on or off. So that's pretty sweet. And then also in the event of a secession, let's say you have low loyalty for all of these guys, and if a secession is provoked, like I said, their whole faction, all the territory is going to go to their side. Now the armies is a different case. The army will depend on who the general is, and the general will switch to, he will secede if he's part of that seceding faction. So it's not just the army stationed here, it has to do with the loyalty of this general. So if you assume that, or if you think that this whole area is going to secede, you're going to want to put in generals that are on the House of Julia's loyalty, send them into this territory, so when this area secedes, you'll have loyal generals in the mix. And then you'll probably want to keep tabs of the other generals, perhaps send them deep into Germania to get slaughtered, or figure out ways to handle them. So I really like that. So they did say early on in the game you'll get a little bit of a grace period in terms of, hey, you're not going to get a secession right off the bat, but I would assume penalties and modifiers will ratchet up as the game proceeds. So that's kind of how areas of influence works. Political party leaders and important characters. Let's look at this. Political parties have traits that modify the way they gain or lose loyalty. Each party has 2 traits. And then they get a 3rd trait from the faction leader. So if we go ahead and look at politics here, you can take a look at this. So each of these houses has 3 traits. Diplomat, hates barbarians, and patriot. So 2 of those are going to be randomized at the start of every campaign. So that's cool. Each house will function differently. And then the 3rd trait is actually going to be due to whoever is the current faction leader. So if the faction leader dies, that 3rd trait will go ahead and be the trait of the successor, for instance. So in this case, you can see here, expansionist for the House of Papiria is tied to its faction leader, whereas the new successor here, the general who's currently positioned in Little Bam, has a different trait. So that's kind of cool. The houses will change kind of the way they operate over time, but they'll be kind of locked into certain things. So for instance here, the House of Papiria here likes mercantilism, and it likes Easterners. So in order to stay in its good graces, I would presume you want to keep up good diplomatic relations with Easterners, and you want to keep good trade levels. Whereas if you want to make buddies with the House of Cornelia, you want to do a big war against the barbarians. So that's kind of interesting how you can play the different ones. House of Junia hates the Greeks. I'm really, really loving this. That's pretty cool. And keep in mind that this will apply to all other factions as well. It's not just going to be Rome. So yeah, let's get back to the overview. So that's kind of how those trait works. And then we've mentioned that there's going to be a political leader as well. I do have to mention, just as a caveat, none of this is really historically accurate in the sense that Rome never had political parties. Yes, it had ruling, clans that were very powerful, but never in the sense of, hardline politics. I mean, this looks like what we see after Election Day in the U.S. with different breakdowns of the House and the Senate. But that's not at all how Roman politics works. It was very much a free-for-all with everyone vying for their own ambitions and teaming up against whoever, who was sticking up and who was getting too much power. There was never clear-cut political demarcations like this. But anyways, let's continue. So that's the political party leaders, important characters, and traits. So we've seen that. The next is going to be government types and reforms. So there's 4 different ones in the game: Kingdom, League, Republic, and Empire. And League, I guess, has 2 names, being Union. League, you would probably think the Delian League or the Peloponnesian League. So this is probably going to be something that is going to be for the Greeks. Kingdom is pretty universal. And then Republic and Empire, so each of them has different bonuses and penalties: public order, number of edicts, etc. The Empire archetype provides slightly better bonuses than the other 3 and is generally the goal of the player to reach this government type, although reforms can be made between all government types at any time. That's kind of cool. Different versions, although there are kind of some limitations. So each faction can reform their government type at cost of money and several turns of instability. So that's kind of interesting. Reforming the government is done from the government overview section in the politics and summary tab in the faction screen. Okay. Empire government type is available to all cultures, so everyone can go for the government type. However, the other three types are only available to some cultures. So, for instance, I think they were saying that for Rome, Rome can only toggle between Republic and Empire. Barbarians here can only reform between Empire, Kingdom, and Union. So it looks like Republic is going to be something that's kind of key to the Romans. And then lastly, they do say that they've been playing a little bit with the cursus honorum. So that is going to be the Roman promotion system where you can go up the ranks, getting a quaestor or different military positions, stuff like that. So the faction leader is now excluded from doing that. Instead, he has a unique trait that depends on the player's government type. So if you look at the politics meter, actually the character meter, and you look at the different ones, if you were to click on the ruling house here, House of Julia, he has the Dictator Trait. So that is going to be his third trait here, is going to be toggled out for just being the faction leader and being a Republic. The leader of the Republic, I guess in this case, is going to be a dictator. I wonder if it'll toggle between dictator and consul. I'm not quite sure, but that's kind of interesting. So that's kind of how that works, different government types and reforms. Secessions and civil wars, we've kind of discussed that real briefly, but the way it works is if you go here and you look at your different factions, House of Junia here, for instance, you want to keep them in, kind of good loyalty and good in your good graces, but once this starts to go down and you start to have antagonistic relationships with them, the risk here of a separation or secession will go up. Currently, right now, you would expect this to be above 0%, but because it's the start of a campaign, they're going a little bit easier on you. Whereas if this were late game Empire, even probably just a little bit of a decrease, once you start to get at -10, -20, stuff like that, this risk of a secession will go higher and higher and higher. And then you can also do different things. So if you want to bring them back into the fold, you can do the secure loyalty action down here, or you could provoke them. And provoking them will be your attempt to force them out the door. Say they have really poor loyalty, you can provoke them, force them to secede, and then crush them. So you can kind of rip the band-aid off, so to speak. I also did want to show this real quickly. Forgot to gloss over it, but here you can see the different government types as Rome. You can just see the Empire or the Republic, and then here you can see the various stats associated with it. Let's go back to this description. So secessions and civil war. So if people get mad at you, like we talked about earlier, if House of Julia gets really mad at you, this whole territory and its generals will secede, and it'll be another faction, and you're going to be at war with it, and you have to come back and redominate it. Civil wars is going to be an extension of secessions. I believe civil war is when it's kind of what happens when something secedes, and then you fight amongst yourselves. But you can have actually... I think you can jump straight to civil war, which is going to be the case. Let's say you have a huge empire here, and then all of a sudden, I don't know... politics goes to shit and there's a lot of people who are mad at you, then all of a sudden you can jump into civil war where there'll be multiple secessions at one time and your empire will fracture into multiple parts. So that's kind of interesting. Let's go over the last little bit. So new political actions. Actually, secessions may turn into civil wars where all parties join either you or the separatists. So that's kind of interesting. So, okay, I had that a little bit wrong. So when you're talking about a civil war is where, if you look at these... the different houses here. What's a good screen to look at? Yeah, I suppose this one. So the different houses. So let's say the House of Cornelia secedes. If it turns into a civil war, then everyone else, the House of Peria, is going to have to declare loyalty in one way or another. So real quickly here, if this is if this is a secession, then just blue secedes. If it's a civil war, then blue will secede, and then it will trigger that the green house here, House of Cornelia, will have to choose one way or another. So that is very interesting. And like I said, when you get really large empires, it means that quickly, if a big base here in the west secedes, you may have Spain taken out with it as well. So that's pretty ominous. That's going to be really cool, though. Okay, so that is secessions and civil war. Lastly, is going to be new political actions. So the political actions here, they've changed it up a little bit. There's a number of new political actions that can be done. Some of them now have direct effects on the campaign gameplay and utilize previously underused statesmen. So political characters that are not currently commanding your army. So we can take a look at that real quickly. Essentially what it is if you look at the character screen, you can click on the different characters, because at the end of the day, you are controlling all of these guys. Yes, they may be from a rival party, but you can still give them actions. So it's really cool. You can give them different missions. So here, for instance, if they're not really being a general and they're just positioned in a province, you can give them different missions. So here you would say, hey, be a diplomat. You click on that and you do send, and what ends up happening is he is going to be walking over, I believe... I can't remember if they actually move physically on the campaign map or if it's just going to be a trigger for something to happen. But anyways, if you do it as a diplomat, they're going to be sent to a foreign nation and perhaps improve political relationships or do something like that. An administrator, if you give them that mission, I'm not sure if they're going to walk over to the particular territory or if it's just kind of a passive buff for wherever they're located. But anyways, if it's administrator, then you get, improvements to probably public order and building time and probably income as well. And then organized feast, if you do that, it can actually increase the food supplies, I believe, in one of your territories. So that's kind of a way you can play with things as well. And then there's different actions that you can do here, all in this nifty revamped UI. Spread rumors, secure promotion to increase your power, or spread rumors to decrease it, marriage and assassination. So a lot more hands-on stuff that you can do there. So that's kind of what they're alluding to. There are a few actions that can be taken against entire parties. These are available from the Politics tab of the faction screen. So if we look at the Politics tab here, take actions against an entire house. So there you go, secure loyalty or provokes. Like we said, secure loyalty is just to increase how much they like you and reduce the risk of them breaking off, whereas provoke will actually drive them the other way on purpose to rip the band-aid off, force them to secede, and then you can kind of deal with them now that the fighting is out in the open instead of in the back alleys. So that's that. And then lastly, they talk about UI changes, lots of little tweaks, tons of stuff, bug fixes, lots of little things. The main takeaways for me is kind of some of the UI things that they've done. So for instance, a building browser. So they've done away with the encyclopedia, or at least they were saying so on stream. And instead they have this nice in-game pop-up. So if you go to a building and you right-click on it, it's going to tell you, hey, this is where your building is. It shows you the building tree. It gives you the details. It tells you what it enables, what it has for the garrison. This is going to be much better. I know a lot of people were apprehensive of using the encyclopedia because it was so slow, so detached, and not very intuitive to navigate. So this is much better. Just right-click on a building and you can see where it's located. So this is going to be great. Same thing also applies to the unit. If you right-click on it, you can see all the stats here, description, abilities, things of that nature. So yeah, that's it for this update. Like I said, we'll probably be doing another video where we go over Total War Rome 2 Empire Divided, but that is it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more. See you in the next one. Peace out.